Hello and welcome to Willowwind's Home Garden. I'm going to try to cover as many different aspects of growing these as possible, including some of the problems that I've had and mistakes that I've made. And so let's start with the soil. This is growing in all sand, and it's very important that you choose a soil that doesn't have any organic matter in it. From everything I've learned from people's experiences growing these, it really seems to be quite important for the overall health of it to be growing in all sand or some sort of cactus mix that doesn't include any organic matter. And all I do is I top dress this with like leaves and juicing pulp, and like you could do like forest compost, you could do just anything that brings in some good beneficial bacteria and fungi. And it doesn't really need mulched, but like you can see right here, there was some leaves and things that were breaking down over the course of the summer, and then of course they did bring in some weed seeds, but that's not too much of an issue. And moving up though, this dragon fruit, when I purchased it, was about, let's see, I think the first section was about to here, so we got about 18 inches. The one on the back was about a foot, and over the course of one summer, it grew from here roughly all the way around into over here. And this one over here grew from right here all the way up and around, and it was initially longer. It was about to here, and so it was about 3 feet that it grew in the very first season that I had it. And the reason for that is actually I wasn't letting it branch out along any of these pads through here till I got it up over to the very bottom of the trellis here. And the reason for that was because I wanted to focus it up the trellis so that it would drape over it. But so whenever you see little growth where you don't want it to be pushing out new pads, all you do is, for example, right over here, like this small little one right here, you can take your little fingernail and just pick it off. And that stops it from growing right there, and you can focus it whatever way you want. And you, especially during the growing season, want to be checking this just a few times a week, possibly even, to make sure that it's not sending out any growth where you don't want it. Now, as you may have noticed, I have a couple of grafts that were successful right here, and this was actually a yellow dragon fruit seedling that I grafted on. Now, the seedling isn't necessarily going to be like the original, but it might be close enough to the point where I'll be happy with it, because I really like the yellow dragon fruit a lot more than your typical pink dragon fruit that have the white flesh. The most common one that you see in the grocery store is what I believe that this parent plant is. And so I grafted on some of these, and as you can see, they have grown a lot over the course of the summer. And this was all just one season of growth right through here. All of this, it's about, I'm gonna say 2.5 feet, some with this particular one, maybe closer to 2 feet with these two. And I couldn't be happier with how much growth that they pushed out. Now let's cover flowering and fruit set. If you didn't know, dragon fruit only flower for one night, and they only can be pollinated actually within a couple days of the day that they flower. You can actually force pollen up into the flower itself a couple days prior to the actual flowering event. So that can be helpful if you don't know that you're going to be home that night that it's going to be flowering. And so, as you might imagine, you can have as many varieties on the same plant or plants as you'd like. And one of the reasons that can be important is because not all dragon fruit types are self-pollinating and self-fertile. And so most of them need hand pollination, and they benefit from, actually all fruit benefit from being actually pollinated with a different variety. They grow bigger, sweeter, have better fruit quality. That's even true for figs, I've found out. And so with that being the case, I definitely want different varieties and different flowers for cross-pollinating these when the time comes. And when it comes to hand pollinating them, all you need is like a Q-tip or a makeup brush, and you just brush some of the pollen onto the different parts of the flower, or you harvest it and save it in a little container in the refrigerator for up to a month, or the freezer for up to 6 months. And then you can use it to pollinate flowers in the future as well. And speaking of different varieties, a good place that I've found for getting them, not that I've actually purchased any from there myself, would be Grafting dragon fruit and Rare dragon fruit. They both have YouTubes, and they both do a awesome job on explaining and going in depth into how they are growing their dragon fruit in California. Now let's talk about the size of your container or pot. So bigger is obviously better, especially with something that grows as large as a dragon fruit plant. And I would definitely recommend possibly even doing just one per 16-inch container like this. Now, as you can see, I did 2. I have seen people do as many as 4 in such a small container. But like with all plants, the bigger the pot, the bigger the plant. But if it isn't very feasible to do a large container, then just do what you can do. Now let's tackle the subject of artificial lighting and if you need it over the winter or not. So, in my experience, you don't. And the reason I say that is the growth that it pushes over the course of the winter, because it's not in full sun, is going to be super tiny unless you have a really good grow light. And I might invest in a grow light, but it definitely isn't a necessity. And all you do is you obviously would just trim off that really weak spindly growth in the spring, and it'll be just fine. Now when it comes to how much sun to give your dragon fruit, I would say at least 10 hours of direct sunlight would be ideal. That's what this one gets. It just gets some shade after about 6 o'clock or so on, and as you can see, it's done really well. But obviously, if you can't give it as much sun, as long as it gets about maybe 8 hours or so, it depends on how south you are and how north you are. Because, like, sun is more intense as you get more south, and it's less intense as you get more north. So then it may need more or less hours. But here in North Carolina, that 10-hour mark or so seems to be just fine. I will link a video on how I grafted these, but just to make it very simple for you, all you need is just a really sharp knife or razor blade to make a very clean cut, and obviously the different variety that you're grafting on, and some tape, saran wrap, just get it really secure and tight onto there. Match the flat side of the dragon fruit with the flat side of the piece you're grafting on, and make sure both of them match up, and the center layer, the cambium layer, the little hard stem that's in the middle of these, make sure that's lined up as well. And cover it and keep it out of direct sunlight. Give it a few weeks and you very well could be seeing new growth, or very likely, at least in my case, you will have to do it again. For example, over here, as you can see, we have what looks to be maybe some success over here. It's just not pushing new growth, but this one over here dried up and is no good. So I'm going to have to redo that one, unfortunately. Now when it comes to watering, I water this about half as much as my other potted plants. So during the heat of the summer, if I'm watering those every day, I'm watering this about every other day. And during more, let's just say, less hot weather and more maybe overcast or rainy weather, maybe like once or twice a week. And especially during the wintertime when this is inside over the winter, I would say for sure no more than once a week, possibly every other week would be just fine. Now let's cover aerial roots and air layering. So as you can see, we have a lot of roots all over the place. And what's cool about these roots is now that some of them have gotten all the way to the soil line, even if the original stem of the plant dies right through here or right through here, as long as it has these roots established into the soil, it will support all the top growth, even if the initial stem has been lost. And so you probably know where this is going. Like for instance, this one right here. I could cut it off down there, and right here it has this really long root coming all the way down and around, and we could stick that in the soil and it will grow from it. to the point where it will push growth and not need to go through the normal rooting process that these would typically have to go through. Now, not all dragon fruit will root like this, and some varieties are known to be notoriously hard to root, but the varieties that do send out aerial roots like this, and quite prevalently, you can make very quick clones of the original plant by just taking advantage of the roots that they put out. Now, something that I've noticed is wherever it's particularly shady is usually where these roots pop out. And so you can encourage that by covering the dragon fruit with like some plastic or burlap or something to shade it enough where it might end up sending out roots in that spot. And as you may know, dragon fruit actually grow up trees and are more of like a vining cactus. And so they will naturally send out those roots where they are searching for something to grab onto. And so now let's get into some of the mistakes I've made. So as you can see right through here, we ended up having a lot of rotting and damage and stuff like that. And the reason for that was actually it sunburning. And I had moved this out this spring because obviously in our climate they can't survive frost and freeze, so I had to bring it inside over the course of the winter. And because of that, when I brought it outside, I thought, well, it's up against the side of the house. I didn't think it was going to get enough sun to the point where it would be an issue, and so on and so forth, and I was wrong. And so it ended up turning yellow and rotting and really bad to the point where I ended up scraping off some of those spots, which I wasn't entirely sure if that was the best course of action, but I removed some of the really rotted material, and as you can see, it has calloused over fairly decent. It just looks ugly. But at least the rot didn't continue and it didn't spread through it all, because that can be a major issue. They can rot very easily. Continuing on the subject of rotting, it's very important that you plant your dragon fruit plants high so that they don't have the actual flesh of the dragon fruit making contact with the soil. Because right here, as you could see, it made contact with the soil, and right here it rotted away. And it can potentially be so bad that you'd lose the whole dragon fruit plant if it's buried too low in the soil. You basically just want the roots covered by a little bit of soil, and that's it, because then it will just spread its roots out and go deep down into the medium, but then it will have this high and dry where it can't rot from soil contact. But to finish on the sunburning subject, all I would do differently is drape over like a screen or frost blanket or something where you can control the amount of sun that it gets and reduce the intensity of it. So you don't necessarily have to move this unless you have a good situation where you can move it slowly into more and more sun over the course of the first few weeks that you bring it outside. Now let's talk about the trellis. So I built this trellis, and if anything, I would say it could have been possibly stronger. As you can see, it's pretty decent. The wiggle that you're seeing is mainly because of this being a 2x4 instead of a 4x4. And I usually saw these built with a 4x4, but I figured I would just try it with the 2x4, and that might have been a mistake. Especially because I didn't seal this with anything and it's just raw wood, and I would definitely recommend painting it and sealing it with something before you end up having the dragon fruit in it. But in the pot here, there's also boards giving it support in the pot, running this way and this way to brace it in each way so that it doesn't fall one way or another. Because dragon fruit plants can get extremely heavy, so definitely don't get like a flimsy trellis and don't under-design it where it doesn't have good strength to it to support all the weight. Now, I've basically not had any sort of problems with rust on this dragon fruit here, and the only time that I did was when it had gotten sunburned, and I either removed the flesh that did get some rust and sunburn, or I wiped it with hydrogen peroxide spray, and it seemed to also kind of just grow out of the issue that it had and recover from it, because this was when we had lower temperatures, not as consistently warm, and this was when it was stressed with that sunburn as well. But I believe you can use a hydrogen peroxide spray, or just like some diluted hydrogen peroxide in like a little sprayer or on a rag, where you wipe out the rust a few times and you treat it and then you rinse it, and to hopefully help treat the situation with the rust. But like I said, I haven't had that much experience with it, so I don't know exactly the best way to go about dealing with it. And so far, I would definitely say it's really fun and rewarding to grow a dragon fruit plant. Not many people can say that they have grown one of these, and then it's just such a highlight of my container garden. I just love it. Dragon fruit really aren't that much harder than any other plant. I would say they're in some ways easier than most potted plants, because you're watering them less, and they also are very forgiving with how much they flush new growth. And so I would highly recommend trying them, even here in North Carolina. Especially because having this inside over the wintertime is just one of the coolest things. And I think that might cover it. But if I forgot anything, definitely let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching to the end. You guys have a great rest of your day.